This is going to be a short update on the winemaking, how to make your own really good plum wine. And I made a misspeak on the first one in that I referred to pectin as being a protein. In reality, this pectin enzyme is the protein, and pectin is actually a complex polysaccharide, which is a really complicated sugar that really can't be broken down by yeast. This is the morning of the third day, and this is just one of the bottles. This happens to be bottle number 4. And I wanted to kind of go over a few things, technical details, and correct that misspeak about pectin. I don't know if at this range you can see the tremendous bubbling activity going on in here, but this is, like I say, the morning of the third day. By the end of the day, it'll have sped up even more. Probably at the peak, it'll be bubbling about 2 times a second. Now, in the background over here is a graduated cylinder, and you should use one that's made for this kind of chemical stuff, or it's resistant to alcohols and things. And in there is a hydrometer. I didn't point out, but this particular formulation that I use comes out with what's called a Brix number of 25. And that means that 25% of that is sugar, or was when it started out. And if the yeast were capable of doing it, it could, if it fermented all the sugar, it would be 25% alcohol. The Brix converts over after fermentation. It can't do that because the champagne yeast that I'm using is between 18 and 20%, is as high as it can ferment. And that's why I meant that there will be sugars left over. And there will be some complex sugars that actually help to produce that Brix number, but they're not available for the yeast. As you can see, there's a current going on. Things are moving around in there. And I'm going to move in a moment, but first I wanted to go over also what I meant about these chemicals here. Bentonite is a negative clay, and clay has been used for centuries to clarify different fluids. You mix it up carefully, and you mix it with a little bit of hot water. You follow the instructions, and then you carefully stir it into something, and the negative clay attracts positive materials and removes them, helps to precipitate them out down to the bottom. Again, things over here on the right, I can use them if I want, but I try not to. Stuff over here on the left I'm going to get into, and for me they're just no-nos. I have them because when I started out, that's how all the people that were introducing me to brewing, that's what they were doing to stabilize their wines and using a lot of that stuff. I've gone over what pectin enzyme is, and it is a protein, and it is not really effective at high alcohol levels, so you have to use it if you're going to before you start to ferment, especially with a champagne yeast. And this is simply a natural yeast superfood, which I do use. I only use about 1/2 to 1/4 of the recommended amount because there's enough nutrition in the prune juice. To go over this stuff, this stabilizer is just potassium sorbate. It's a preservative. It is recognized as being relatively safe and benign. It's used to inhibit any further yeast action under the right conditions, and I think it has bacterial properties too. These Campden tablets I really stay away from. When you crush them up and you dissolve them in wine, it produces sulfur compounds that like sterilize the wine and then supposedly dissipate. I don't like these two. And grape tannins, which that's what that is. That's supposed to give you more acidity, which is a better environment for a clean ferment. There's a lot of tannins in grapes, and I don't happen to like the taste of tannins, and I'm not really that hot on the taste of grapes. They're too sharp. So a few times I was convinced that I should use a tiny amount of tannins, and universally it threw a bad flavor and it was terrible, so I don't use that. So these are all kind of just leftover legacy stuff from the beginnings. Bentonite, I don't know, it can throw an earthy flavor, but if you need to get rid of certain elements to clear up your wine, then you can use bentonite. And even at high alcohol levels, if you only have a very small amount of pectin in the stuff, you can use this pectin enzyme. Like I say, though, it's much more effective before you start to ferment. Prunes and apricots and things are fairly high in pectin. They have about 1% pectin. I guess in somebody's normal diet, that 1% pectin is about 5 grams a day, or maybe 20% of an ounce or something. And that's just from eating normal fruits and things. Also, I wanted to go over that somebody may have mistaken about using hydrogen peroxide. I use hydrogen peroxide to sterilize my bottles and everything else because it doesn't leave any residue, and it's really strongly antibacterial and antifungal. I don't ever put it in the actual brew. This is the only place that I use hydrogen peroxide is in the airlock, and that's simply because it stops any microbial activity in the airlock. The rest of this is all just going along, and it's what's called anaerobic. The oxygen's been pushed out by the carbon dioxide, and this headspace here is all carbon dioxide. As I say, we're starting day 3 of a 6-day ferment. And I just wanted to go over a few of those things to also point out there is a Brix number on this, and when this stops, I will take it to the next phase. Now I have 4 of these cylinders, 4 of these PET bottles. I usually do 3 or 4, and one of the reasons that I use these is that if you do a 5-gallon brew, you've committed to 5 gallons of something, and if you don't like it, well, it's too bad. There goes 5 gallons. And water weighs 8 pounds per gallon, so I don't really relish moving around a 40-pound fermenter, kind of a mess. This way, everything fits. It's easy to move and store, and if one of the bottles goes bad, I just lose half a gallon or 2 liters. You can see the bubbling there. I'm going to move this in now slowly, so pardon me if it kind of, wiggles around or something, but I'm going to try and give an idea of how much activity is really going on here. See, there's just a lot. And it'll actually even go up from here, as I say, for another day or day and a half, and then it'll ramp down. When it gets down to about 1 bubble every 10 to 15 seconds, it's time for the next phase, and that's what I'll cover in the next video. So thanks for watching. This is what a fermenting bottle looks like about 2 days into what's going on here. It's a good pasture champagne yeast. It's popping the airlock with a bubble about every 2 seconds. It will, by tomorrow, be maybe throwing a bubble every second or even faster. And I hope you can see this, because it's this great upwelling of these bubbles. And what's really nice about these containers is because the bottom has these ridges and peaks, this develops its own convection currents which stir it and really do effectively help this. Kind of pretty.